I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today we're comparing three small SUVs, but it's a comparison a little bit unlike what we normally do. Usually we pit cars that are very similarly priced and in similar classes together. Today though, we're comparing the brand new Mazda CX-30 SUV in G25 Astina form, about 43,000 Australian dollars, with two entry-level German luxury SUVs that cost a bit more, to find out if Mazda Premium, the new philosophy at the Japanese brand, is a load of hot air, if it really means something. So today we also have the Audi Q3 in 35 TFSI form, which is about 46,000 Australian dollars, and a perennial favourite of buyers in this segment, the BMW X1. Now this one is an xDrive 25i. The real competitor here is the S-Drive 20i, which costs just over 48,000 Australian dollars. So by spending a few thousand more than the Mazda, do you get a luxury experience? Or are you better to save a little bit of money and buy the CX-30? Is the CX-30 truly a vehicle that deserves its place here in this set? That's what we're going to find out in today's comparison on Chasing Cars as we check out the interiors, the cargo room, and the driving dynamics of this trio. Before we get started, if you haven't already subscribed, do so below the video and you'll never miss any of our in-depth content. And now, strap in for the ride. So the new Mazda CX-30 does a top-end CX-30 which costs just over $43,000 match the two German luxury SUVs here, or does it betray its less expensive roots? Well, just like we found when we drove this car together in Germany last year, the CX-30 is a standout for mass volume SUVs. It has a lovely interior. Just like the Mazda 3, it really ups Mazda's interior quality and luxury game really effectively. I mean, firstly, it is evident visually, it looks very nice, it looks quite Germanic, to be honest, including the floating screen up here that is more than a bit reminiscent of a BMW display, but it isn't a touchscreen. It's also a bit smaller, 8.8 inches, meaning that the visible area is a bit less and it can only be controlled with a rotary dial. Not that you'll find me complaining about that, because it's a great way to interact with the technology on a bumpy road. No wireless CarPlay, however. You have to plug in your phone for CarPlay or Android Auto, but that's not that big of a deal. Really nice, almost Art Deco-like steering wheel, thin rim, shortcut buttons looking forward at partial analog, partial digital gauges, which are quite attractive, though they don't have, you know, the kind of pizzazz of the Audi virtual cockpit. Now the seats, you get really supple leather seats in this Astina at the top end of the CX-30 range. You can go for black or pure white. The white in this car looks really interesting with brown and blue material up on the dash. It's actually quite a sight to behold, but I think it comes together. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Got electric adjustment on the driver's seat, manual on the passenger. I do have memory over here and heated seats and a sunroof and a Bose stereo, all included, so you don't have to spend more money. You kind of get everything. I mean, that's what the Mazda has to do to be able to compete, I think. Practicality is also pretty good. Armrest is fixed, but lots of space, old style USB port, medium-sized cup holders, bit of space ahead of those, and big door bins, but we don't have wireless smartphone charging. But what's life like in the back? Let's find out. It's obviously designed to be bigger than the CX-3, which is not going anywhere in Mazda's lineup, but it's not a big small SUV like that BMW X1. Instead, it's relatively compact back here. At 6 foot, I've got, you know, an inch or two of headroom, which is good. Legroom is a little tighter sitting behind myself. I do have half an inch or so, and toe room, that's not a problem. I think you could put 5 people back here at a pinch, as long as they're not too massive or not basketball players. You got air vents, which is cool. We do have this flip down armrest, but it doesn't have USB charge points like the bigger Mazda CX-5. 2 big cup holders though is always nice. It's just a bit of a shame that the materials up here revert to hard for the top of the doors. but they are soft down below. When the new Q3 launched last year, we praised it for a lovely interior and also its generous specification even on the base model, which is this car we're sitting in. This one has no options. It's the $46,000 35 TFSI, so just a small step above a CX-30 Astina. And you actually get quite a lot of kit for your money, which is unusual for an entry-level German luxury car. And that starts with the best infotainment of this trio. You've got a nice crisp screen down here in the dash running Audi's latest infotainment software. Now it is a touchscreen. Audi ditched their rotary MMI controller a while ago now, which is a bit of a shame, but the screen works well. It has the full Audi Connect suite, so that includes a Telstra 4G SIM card for 3 years, which powers stuff like satellite mapping, local fuel prices, online radio, how many parking spots are available if you have a connected parking station near you. So the integration is cool. You also get wireless smartphone charging for free and a small virtual cockpit screen ahead of you, so you can put a full map in front of you, which is really intuitive. Audi have been doing that best for several years now. Audi also give you leather seats without having to option up anything further, which is more generous than BMW. Now, they are only manually adjustable and they're not particularly well bolstered. They're not a sports seat, but they feel kind of nice and soft and are comfortable over a longish drive. You can upgrade to heated seats with electric adjustment for a small impost as well. So you get a nice steering wheel, it's well stitched, it kind of looks quite luxurious, and the secondary materials are soft and squidgy, so it does have the air of a premium car in here. And the practicality is pretty good. You've got 2 big cup holders, small box here, another little dinky tray, new USB-C port and an old USB port, and big door bins. But what about life in the back? Pull on these nice metal toggles to get out. And in here we find that, despite the Q3's relatively compact dimensions outside, thunk, the space in the back is good. So for me as a 6-footer, I've got adequate headroom, very much so. We don't have the sunroof here, it makes it a bit easier. Legroom is fine, tow room's generous. Now I think compared to the X1, this is more of a 4-seater than a 5-seater because it does have a big hump in the floor, despite only having front-wheel drive, much like an X1 20i. We do have some amenities though. Flip down armrest here with cup holders, always nice. Air vents like the other cars here. 2 fast charging USB-C ports and a 12-volt socket. Squidgy materials in the back, and like the BMW, the seats also slide fore and aft, so you can maximize cargo space if you want to. Now, we mentioned that this particular X1 isn't a perfect match on spec for the other cars here. This is the 63 grand 25i because it was all that was available to us to shoot. The $48,000 20i model is the better match. That said, everything you see in this more expensive interior, you can get as an option on the 20i if you really like it. But in that $48,000 X1, what do you get? Well, you get cloth seats, not these Dakota leather seats. They only have manual adjustment, but you can option in leather and electric adjustment if you want. But a lot of the other basics are all the same no matter which X1 you get, including this slightly dated looking dashboard that's previous generation BMW design, but you get a relatively modern 10.25 inch display up top, which is a touchscreen, and it can also be controlled with BMW's rotary dial down here that continues to work really well. Plus, it has wireless Apple CarPlay, which BMW were the first company to bring to market, so it works very well. There's also no longer a subscription for that. Got analog dials that actually look very attractive, partial digital component, and a lovely previous gen BMW M steering wheel. Mind you, the wheel you get on the 20i isn't quite as cool looking as this. The driving position, it's actually set quite high. You sit on the X1, not ensconced into it, which is a bit of a surprise given this is a BMW. But material quality is very good and practicality is excellent too, with big cup holders, big box and a USB-C port beneath this adjustable armrest, another tray down there and big door bins. So up front, it's very decent. What's life like in the back? Let's find out. Because the X1's back seat is where BMW plays their trump card in this segment because it's very spacious. That's because the X1 is actually quite a large small SUV. So for me at 6 foot, I've got good headroom despite this optional panoramic sunroof. Legroom's okay, and tow room is very generous. You could fit 5 people fairly easily because there's not much hump in the floor. We have a pull-down armrest with cup holders, air vents very important, and 2 USB-C fast charging ports, and those soft touch materials don't go away. Here around back, all 3 of these small SUVs differ in terms of how much cargo space they offer and also in how they look. So let me know down below in the comments which of these you think is the best looking. But a feature all 3 of them have is an electric tailgate. So I have my 2 assistants, Alec and John, here to help me find out which of these is the most efficient at getting that cargo space open. So boys, grab your latches and 3, 2, 1. And that was pretty close between the BMW and the Audi, but the Mazda was easily the slowest. But once you've gotten over that speed, of course, the important question is how much room do each of these SUVs have? It's the new Audi Q3, which has the most boot space on paper with 530 litres in its spacious square boot. Now you've got this bright work down here to protect your paint when you slide stuff in and out, and very little load lip. You've also got 2 cubbies off to each side, one big, one small, but what you don't have is underfloor storage. You do have a cargo cover here. Pop that boot down and move on to the new Mazda CX-30, which has the smallest boot here. It's a bit of a trend with Mazda SUVs. They're usually not as big as their rivals, and so it goes here. The CX-30 has either 422 litres if you include underfloor storage, or 317 litres if you don't. Only problem is, I can't really see any underfloor storage. Potentially the Australian delivered cars just have the boot floor at their lowest setting. If you know the answer, let me know down in the comments. But otherwise, it's a really unremarkable boot. There's no special features apart from a tiny, almost non-existent cubby. So not as well thought out as the Germans. And then there is the BMW X1, which has a 505 litre boot. And I won't lie to you, to my eyes, it looks bigger than the Audi Q3, but these are VDA specifications, so apparently it isn't. Still a nice big square boot. Got the bright work again, so you don't scratch your paint. Absolutely no load lip. You do have tons of underfloor storage in the BMW, however, plus a square cubby on the side, a netted area, clear shopping bag hooks. So for me, the X1 has the best boot, but there isn't all that much in it. And of course, you know, the real story here is that each of these SUVs probably has a little bit more cargo space than you'd expect. But what are each of these compact premium crossovers like to drive? That could be the element that definitively splits them apart. So let's start in the Mazda CX-30, which is this group's sole naturally aspirated offering. The Mazda CX-30 takes a different approach to the other 2 cars here in many of its driving dynamics, but the biggest one would be in the engine that sits under the bonnet, and that's because unlike most small German luxury cars, this vehicle does not have a turbocharged engine. Instead, Mazda opt for a bigger capacity 4-cylinder petrol with no turbocharging. So we have a 2.5 litre engine here, so considerably bigger than the 1.4 litre Audi or the 2 litre BMW. And as such, the outputs look good. And thanks to the engine's high compression ratio, even without a turbo, most of that torque still comes on song relatively soon in the rev range. That being said, you do have to occasionally rev the CX-30 harder than you do the other 2 in order to generate that pulling power. But when you do that, at least the 2.5 litre engine sounds reasonable, not too coarse, and you make fairly good progress. Now, you can get the CX-30 with front-wheel drive and save a bit of money, or all-wheel drive for extra traction in slippery conditions, but you aren't going to feel a massive difference in the dry. It's just not powerful enough for that. Now, the fuel consumption is a little bit more thirsty than the 2 turbocharged cars here, but there's not a huge amount in it, and the refinement is, you know, it's about the same. The engine is a bit noisier because you have to rev it a bit harder, but that said, you make very, very similar progress. What's so good about the CX-30's driving dynamics though is the chassis tuning, which is superb. This thing is a lovely car to steer, whether in town or on a great back road, because it has beautiful steering, perfectly mid-weighted, really direct connection to the front wheels, plenty of grip even though it has the skinniest tyres here, and a really nice suspension setup. There's a bit of body roll because Mazda believe that takes some of the pressure off the tyres, and I have to say I agree with that. And all in all, it just feels very natural. You turn into a corner, you know, kind of quickly, you just dab the brakes, you get a touch of lift off oversteer, the whole thing sort of dances down a back road beautifully. Now in town, the 18-inch wheels that are fitted to most CX-30s do have a slight sharp edge on a pothole, but most of the time the ride is perfectly acceptable. And the CX-30 is also very quiet while cruising. It's very refined, quieter than the BMW X1 inside even, which really speaks volumes about what Mazda are doing to make their cars extremely competitive. Similarly, there's just a luxury feel that pervades the driving experience. You feel like you're in a car $20,000 more expensive from behind the wheel. It's that impressive. What's also impressive is how you get the best safety of the bunch despite having the lowest price. So you get high-speed AEB, adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, front cross traffic alert even as well, 360-degree parking camera, and like a pilot assist program that can navigate traffic jams semi-autonomously. All in all, it's a great package. Even though the Audi Q3 35 TFSI has the smallest engine here by far, it punches well above its weight. It makes up for its 1.4 litres in capacity by having one of the most linear, refined 4-cylinder engines on the market. The EA288 Volkswagen Group engine has been lauded for many years as one of the best turbo 4s out there, and it's easy to understand why, because it combines frugal fuel economy with outputs that belie that small size. So despite having only a 1.4, the outputs of 110 kilowatts of power, which is kind of low, and 250 newton meters of torque are pretty good. And that 250 newton meters comes on song just above idle, meaning that you always have motivation off the line, and the Q3 is, you know, pretty convincing up until about 100 kilometers per hour. After that point, it becomes a little bit lethargic, so the other cars here are slightly better for country overtaking, I find. That said, Audi say they do have bigger engines for the Q3 coming soon, but this is the car that's priced, you know, equivalently to a top-spec CX-30, so this is the one that we look at. Now, the fuel consumption of about 8 litres per 100 Ks in town and about 5.5 litres per 100 on the highway is impressive. And the engine is very quiet. It never makes a raucous sound even when you're revving it right out. Now, the other aspects of the Q3's driving experience are similarly impressive. The steering is mid-weighted, lighter than the other two cars here, but that's suitable for the sort of vehicle that it is, and it actually makes it quite light and delicate to drive on a back road. It's easily maneuverable in town too, and visibility is pretty good out of this thing, but it is surprisingly enjoyable to drive hard, I've got to be honest. It has a really lovely little chassis. The Q3 now rides on the Volkswagen Group's MQB platform, which is lightweight and really rigid, and you can feel those virtues in the Q3 in spades. It turns in with alacrity, and it just gently sort of belays its rear end around behind it. I think the CX-30 is slightly more fun to drive on a good road, but the Audi is extremely cohesive and consistent. All of the control surfaces have similar weighting, and you can tell a lot of work went into refining the dynamics of this vehicle. Similarly, the suspension is excellent. It rides very well. This base model's 18-inch wheels offer plenty of cushioning over bumps, and on back roads, it just lopes along in a really, you know, relaxing manner. It's also pretty quiet too. Plus, you can drive along with a satellite map in front of you and just feel like you're in touch with your surroundings. Similarly, the safety package is pretty good. We have high-speed AEB, we have a lane keep assist, lane departure warning, blind spot monitoring, and rear cross traffic alert all standard, plus a decent reversing camera, though you do need to pay more if you want adaptive cruise control, which I think is slightly nickel-dimey. So, what is the BMW X1 like to drive? Well, I know we have kind of the wrong power output here with the 25i model, but thankfully it's actually the same 2-litre turbo 4-cylinder as you get in the 20i, just with slightly more power. So the relevant vehicle has 141 kilowatts of power and 280 newton meters of torque. So about the same power as the CX-30, another 30 newton meters of torque, but it makes its power quite differently because of its turbocharger. which of course the Mazda doesn't have. And just like this version of the engine, there is always torque available down low, which makes it feel quite muscular, and certainly it's quick enough both on a country road and in town. The engine itself is quite BMW-y in that there's good throttle response, it sounds all right, and it's pretty refined, plus fuel consumption is very manageable, about 9 litres per 100 k's in town and sub 6 on the highway, which is impressive. Unfortunately, the rest of the driving experience in the X1 is not really up to what I would consider kind of normal BMW dynamics. The steering is just okay, and what I mean by that is it feels a little bit slushy and doughy on turn-in, and then once it's loaded up, it's relatively decent, but newer BMWs have more feelsome steering, I think. That said, it's perfectly maneuverable in town, and the large windows and mirrors mean that visibility is excellent out of the BMW X1. Now, similarly, the ride quality is perfectly acceptable in town. On 19-inch wheels, it's a little bit sharp, but the 20i model does come with smaller wheels anyway. That said, it's a good idea to spend extra money on the adaptive dampers that make the X1 more comfortable and with better body control, because on standard dampers like this car, on a country road, it actually becomes a bit unruly with quite wayward body control over large mid-corner bumps, which are very common in Australia. The stability control has to intervene quite a lot, and it just feels a little bit out of its depth on a back road, which is a bit unusual for a BMW, to be honest. That said, most people are going to stay in the confines of the city or the highway, where the BMW X1 is very inoffensive as a vehicle to drive. That said, it just doesn't have the sporty edge that I was quite expecting. What it does have though is a great deal of refinement. It's very quiet, near silent going down the highway, which is great. Unfortunately though, in terms of safety features, it's left behind by the other two. It doesn't have adaptive cruise control, it does have autonomous emergency braking and lane keep assist, but there's no blind spot monitoring or rear cross traffic alert, and you just get a standard reversing camera. So after looking at the interiors, the practicality and the driving dynamics of each of these small premium SUVs, it's clear that each alternative has positive points and also one or two negatives. So let's sum it up and work out which is best to take home. And that, of course, brings us to the need for a verdict in this comparison. What's most impressive is how well the Mazda CX-30 fits in with this bunch. It absolutely deserves to be here. A CX-30 in G25 Astina form fits into the small luxury SUV set with ease, thanks to its extremely refined interior, its expert-tuned chassis, and its general air of premium panache, which would have been unheard of 10 or 20 years ago in a Mazda. It's a job very well done, but ultimately the winner in today's comparison is the Audi Q3 35 TFSI, and it's been cars like the Mazda CX-30 that have forced Audi to increase the value for money in their base model SUVs, and that's the reason why the Q3 is as well specified as it is and as inexpensive as it is. For just a small jump over the CX-30, you can get into a car that feels really solid, has the best technology of this trio, and also looks pretty good. The BMW X1 brings up the rear. It just feels like it's getting on a little bit in years now, and its driving dynamics aren't as up to scratch enough to justify its price premium as a BMW. But of course, those are just my opinions. You can vote up in the top right-hand corner in a poll about which car, after seeing this whole video, you think should have won. And of course, let me know down in the comments all your thoughts about this comparison. Make sure while you're down there to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.